Hey, Tubies! This is Psychic Bob. Oh, it is so rocking to be with you. Well, I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my zodiac wheel and thinking about horoscopes. Have you been over to my blog today and checked your new horoscope? If you haven't done that, check that out. Just go over to psychicbobhoroscopes.blogspot.com and you can get your custom horoscope. These are my own creation. I don't take them from any other astrology site or any astrologers. And every day I put up horoscopes for all 12 zodiac signs. So, if you've been wondering what's in the stars for you, check it out. And just so you know, for those of you who are new or haven't been here the last few days, we're running a contest. So if you go over to my blog, put a comment on it, put your name on it. Next Friday, I'm going to do a drawing. I'm going to take all the names off of the blogs for the whole week and cut them up, put them in a hat, and draw a name. And whoever wins gets a free private hour reading with me. That's a $150 value prize. My private readings are $150 for an hour. And so you'll get a free private reading with me by telephone or by Skype. So, I think you might want to do that. So go over, check out my horoscopes. I tell you, as I've been studying the horoscopes, it's got me watching the stars, watching the sky. And, as a psychic, I tend to not only just look at the star patterns and the planetary patterns, I tend to get drawn into the energy around planets and I can sense the life forms. And, one of the planets I've been thinking about lately has been the planet Venus. Now, we've talked about Venus here before, and this is a fascinating planet because on the planet Venus, it is believed that there are humanoids. Now, I know a lot of people say, well, Bob, they sent a probe there. There's no life. Well, listen, if a probe came to Earth and it landed in the middle of the Sahara Desert and looked around for an hour, would it say there's life on Earth? Probably not. So there are regions of Venus that I do believe are habitable. We also have to take into account that there are underground bases on Venus as well. So even for the areas that have a hostile terrain, Venus still has underground abilities. And what's interesting is I've been working on studying about the Venusians, and I was looking through my book here called Flying Saucers Have Landed. This is by George Adamski, and he talks about one of his encounters with an actual Venusian. So I thought I'd read a little bit of this here to you guys, okay? Um, and this is a meeting that took place with George Adamski and some other witnesses. They were actually brought out to a desert area, and they had literally a flying saucer landed, and a man came out who was an alien. Now, what's really cool is the witnesses to this did sign sworn affidavits before a notary, and this was presented with this book. So these people are truly not playing around. They really went out on a legal limb to prove that this happened. And so anyways, I thought I'd read a little bit of this to you here, okay? So this is after the ship has landed and he sees the man approaching him. And he says, he was about 5 feet 6 inches in height and weighed, according to our standards, about 135 pounds. And I would estimate him to be about 28 years of age, although he could have been much older. He was round-faced with extremely high forehead, large but calm gray-green eyes, slightly aslant in the outer corners, and slightly higher cheekbones than an Occidental, but not so high as an Indian or an Oriental. A finely chiseled nose, not conspicuously large, and an average-sized mouth with beautiful white teeth that shone when he smiled or spoke. As nearly as I can describe his skin, the coloring would be an even, medium-colored suntan, and it did not look to me as though he had ever had to shave, for there was no more hair on his face than that of a child's. His hair was sandy in color and hung in beautiful waves to his shoulders, glistening more beautifully than any woman's I have ever seen. And I remember a passing thought of how Earth women would enjoy having such beautiful hair as this man had. As I said before, he wore no protection over it, and it was being blown by the winds. His clothing was a one-piece garment, which I had a feeling was a uniform worn by spacemen as they travel. Like Earthmen in various types of work wear uniforms to indicate their occupations. Its color was a chocolate brown, and it was made of a rather full blouse, close-fitting high collar, much like a turtleneck, and only it did not turn down. The sleeves are long, slightly full, and similar to a raglan sleeve, with close-fitting bands around the wrists. A band about 8 inches in width circled his waist, and the only break in coloring of the entire garment was a strip about 1.5 inches in width at the top and bottom of his waistband. This was brighter and of a more golden brown. The trousers were rather full and held in at the ankles with bands like those of the sleeves at the wrists, in a style much like ski pants. Actually, it's difficult to describe this garment in coloring, for I know no descriptive word or language that would suit it perfectly. Anyways, he goes on and talks about the rest of his clothes, which I won't go on. It goes on for like 3 pages of description. But what's interesting is he describes that this person was absolutely human in appearance. Like, to see him face to face, you would never think that he was not an Earth person. But this person did go on to reveal that he was from Venus. In fact, actually, let me read you that section, because I think that that's an important conversation. Hold on, let me read this to you. And he says, so to convey the meaning of my first question to him, he's basically saying, where are you from? He says, so to convey the meaning of my first question to him, I began forming, to the best of my quality, a picture of a planet in my mind. At the same time, I pointed to the sun high in the sky. He understood this, and his expression so indicated. Then I circled the sun with my finger, indicating the orbit of the planet closest to the sun, and said, Mercury. I circled it again for the second orbit and said, Venus. The third circle I spoke, Earth, and indicated the earth upon which we were standing. I repeated this procedure a second time, all the while keeping as clear a picture of a planet in my mind as I was able to perceive, and this time pointing to myself as belonging to the earth. Then I indicated him with a question in my eyes and in my mind. Now he understood perfectly. And smiling broadly, he pointed to the sun, made an orbit, made the second. Then touching himself with the left hand, he gestured several times with his right index finger towards the second orbit. I took this to mean that the second planet was his home. I asked, you mean you come from Venus? This was the third time I had spoken the word Venus in relation to the second planet, and he nodded his head in the affirmative. Then he too spoke the word Venus. So, anyways, very fascinating. And they go on in that conversation, and they say, why have you come to Earth? And this Venusian alien indicates that the people on Venus are very concerned about the nuclear program on Earth, that they're believing that there's capabilities to inflict great damage throughout the universe with our nuclear weapons. And you have to remember, this was in like the 1950s, early 1950s. So this is at the height of the nuclear program. And supposedly the Venusians came to help bring a message to Earth that, hey, we're out here and what you're doing is affecting us. Now, what's really interesting about this, and you can research this, I'll put some links below. And later in the 1950s, there was an alien who came to Earth and was received, no joke, at the Pentagon. His name, I think it was more of his nickname, was Thor, like the god Thor, because he looked very much like Thor. And Thor was a Venusian. Now, the average person walking around the Pentagon had no clue that this was a space alien. But Thor was brought into the inner circle, the inner sanctum of the government and the Pentagon, because he was sent from Venus also to help guide the handling of nuclear issues on the Earth. And so when he proved to the Pentagon, military brass that he really was from another planet, he was given full access and brought into the inner circles. Now, he actually became kind of well known, and he was in the Pentagon up until the 1960s, I believe, at which time I believe that he actually left and went back to Venus. But I'll show some pictures here. I want to put up here. This is what he looked like. So as you can see, his nickname was Valiant Thor because he was on a mission and he was doing great things. So they started calling him Valiant Thor. But he looked absolutely human. Now, the interesting thing is, physiologically, he was different. And when the scientists did exams of him, they discovered that he only has one central lung. As humans, we have two lungs. But the Venusians, according to what they discovered, have one central lung. The rest of his body looked very, very normal. He was about 5'6" in height, average size, average build, normal teeth, face, skin, all the same, except for some of the internal organs were a little different. And his blood, interestingly, had a very high copper content. So it was not compatible with human blood. It looked like human blood. From what I understand, it was red, but the chemical makeup had a lot of copper in it. So very, very interesting. And I'm just curious, have any of you heard about Thor working at the Pentagon? What's interesting is it does seem to have a lot of confirming sources that are pointing this out, and there seem to be photographs. So I'm going to, encourage you guys, research this. You'll find out there's a lot of stuff out there. But, I think it just proves to the fact that there are aliens visiting the Earth. And I do think that, as I've predicted, in the next 2 years, all of this is going to come out. It's really going to get, in the public eye in a way that it will no longer be denied. So, I want to just keep watch here. The Venusians, the Palladians, these are the alien races that are very much like us. And it may well be, I suspect, that it will be one of the humanoid races who we are first introduced to. I think if the government came right out with the Greys, putting them on the White House lawn, that would create panic. But I think that most people would be able to receive and accept a Venusian or a Pleiadian. And that's what I predict we're going to see for the first round of alien revelation. Anyways, so tell me in the box below, have you heard of Thor or Valiant Thor? Are you familiar with them? Does this picture look familiar? Maybe you know somebody who worked at the Pentagon and actually saw him or knew about it, has told you about it. If you have a Thor story, I'd love to hear it. Anyways, guys, just want to bring that here to you. Hope that's giving you something to think about today. I think it's all very, very fascinating. So anyways, definitely, if you want to learn more about the Venusians, check out this book. It's an old one from the 50s, but I'm sure you can find it around, by George Adamski. It's called Flying Saucers Have Landed. And, it tells all about the Venusians. Very fascinating. Very fascinating. And do some research at the links below on Thor. Anyways, hope this has given you some insight today. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and experiences. Maybe you've actually met a Venusian. I'd love to hear about it. Seriously. So anyways, put comments in the box below. Oh, by the way, if you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe, join our channel. We'd love you to be part of Spirit Channel. In the meantime, go over today, check out your horoscopes at psychicbobhoroscopes.blogspot.com if you haven't done so, and get your free psychic help there. Anyways, guys, I'm so glad you're here. Keep it here at Spirit Channel. Tomorrow, Tuesday, we're going to have messages from the spirit world, and you don't want to miss it. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Blessings to you all.